Chapter 1. The Invitation to Greyhaven Manor. The rain had just begun to fall in soft, silvery threads outside Hercule Poirot's London apartment. The faint patter against the window-pane formed a soothing rhythm, a quiet lullaby for the little Belgian detective who sat peacefully before his morning cup of chocolate. The world, for once, seemed unhurried. The scent of freshly polished wood mingled with the aroma of roasted beans drifting from the café below, and Poirot found himself smiling at the simple serenity of the moment. It was then that the letter arrived, an envelope of creamy parchment, sealed with a crimson wax crest. The postman's knock was gentle, almost apologetic, as if even he hesitated to disturb the calm. Poirot took the envelope delicately between his fingers, admiring the fine craftsmanship of the seal, a stylized iron gate surrounded by curling ivy, and the faint imprint of the initials G.M. He turned the letter in his hands, feeling the faint texture of the wax beneath his thumb. "Ah," he murmured softly, "something about this speaks of an age long gone. How very romantic." He broke the seal with care, as though awakening a sleeping secret. The letter within was written in a graceful hand, every stroke deliberate and dignified. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation for discretion precedes you. I invite you to Greyhaven Manor, a quiet estate in the Devon countryside, to advise on a matter most delicate. You will find our surroundings tranquil, though some might say haunted by the past. Yours, with utmost respect, Lady Amelia." Greyhaven Poirot leaned back, reading the words again. The rain outside thickened slightly, the soft hiss of droplets blending with the crackle of his fireplace. He found the sound oddly comforting, like the hush of conversation in a dimly lit room. "Greyhaven Manor," he whispered, savoring the syllables. "An estate with an iron gate, a matter most delicate. Mon Dieu, what is life without a little curiosity?" As he prepared to leave, Poirot moved with unhurried grace. His suitcase was small and perfectly ordered, the garments pressed and folded with mathematical precision. He took a moment to glance at his reflection in the mirror. His mustache glistened, impeccable as ever. Outside, the rain had softened into a mist, wrapping the city in a gentle gray veil. The cab ride to the station was smooth and quiet, the streets glistening beneath the pale glow of gas lamps. At the train platform, Poirot inhaled deeply. The countryside train awaited, humming faintly with the promise of distance and discovery. A calm descended upon him as he watched the world slide by beyond the window-green fields bathed in dew, cottages sleeping beneath the fog, and rivers that wound like ribbons of silver. He felt no rush, no pressing urgency, only the pleasant anticipation of a mystery that whispered rather than shouted. Somewhere beyond those hills lay Greyhaven Manor, its iron gate standing silent under the weight of its secrets. And yet, for the moment, all was peace, the steady rhythm of the train, the quiet roll of the landscape, and the reassuring thought that every locked gate, no matter how ancient, could one day be gently opened. Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, to travel toward mystery in such serenity," he murmured. "Perhaps even the darkest secrets deserve to be uncovered in the most peaceful light." Chapter 2. Whispers. Through the fog, the train slid into the small Devon station as quietly as a letter slipping under a door. Morning mist lay across the platform in pale folds, gentling every edge and softening every sound so that trunks thumped like polite taps and voices floated as if spoken into wool. Hercule Poirot stepped down with an unhurried grace, pausing to draw a slow, contented breath. The air tasted of rain and distant sea salt, a clean, mineral calm that seemed to touch the nerves like cool fingertips. A coach awaited, dark lacquered and tidy, with a pair of horses that steamed in the chill. Their tails swayed lazily, unconcerned, and the driver doffed his cap with a smile that creased the corners of his eyes rather than his mouth. Poirot's suitcase, neat, compact, impossibly square, was stowed with care. A porter lifted a hand in farewell as the carriage rolled away, its wheels whispering over the wetted road like a pencil across fine paper. Fields drifted by in tranquil greens, divided by hedgerows feathered with dew. Crows hopped in dignified pairs across a meadow, and a little brook showed itself only as a sudden shiver among reeds. The fog arranged itself in ribbons along the low places, allowing a copse to appear, then dissolving it again as if the morning were a stage, and everything upon it a gentle illusion. Poirot rested a gloved hand on the window frame and allowed his eyes to wander, content with the soft, measured company of silence in time. The lane curved toward a slope. From the gray gauze of distance, chimneys rose like pointers on a compass, and an old roofline stepped its way across the fog. Greyhaven Manor, its shape, did not intrude upon the landscape. It settled as a stone settles in a stream, long accustomed to the water flowing around it. As the carriage climbed, the fog thinned, and Poirot saw the famous iron gate, set wide enough to welcome and narrow enough to remember its solemn duty. Ivy stitched along the bars in green thread, and the hinges looked old in the comforting way of church bells and well-loved books. The coach passed under the stone arch, and the driver slowed without being asked, for there was a hush here that asked for gentleness. The gravel gave a restful sigh beneath the wheels. Poirot admired the Facada timber-bird gables, pale stone warmed by patches of lichen, windows that reflected the soft sky like bowls of milk. A footman appeared on the steps, impeccably straight as a bookmark, and the door opened as if it had been waiting with patience rather than impatience. "Welcome to Greyhaven, monsieur," said the butler, whose name Poirot would later learn was Mr. Walden. The voice was mild and precise, flavored faintly with Earl Grey. "Lady Greyhaven sends her compliments and asks that you be made very comfortable." "Mais naturellement," Poirot replied, smiling like a man who appreciates both the ritual and the sincerity that hides within it. He stepped into the hall, and the house surrounded him with a warmth that felt like a shawl drawn close. The entry was large, but not too impressed, rather to breathe. Wood, polished to a bloom, held the glow of a late morning fire. The marble floor gave back one's footsteps without echo, as if the house disliked to repeat itself. On a side table, a white bowl held a mound of lemons. They shone like pale suns in the dimness, and the clean citrus perfume rose to meet the faint fragrance of beeswax. A grandfather clock, serious but not severe, ticked in a rhythm that agreed with the soft beating of one's own heart. Poirot looked up at the stairwell and saw not a display of portraits, but a procession of the Mancestors and Advocates, a lineage of faces that observed without judging. Between the frames, a tapestry of sea and ship had faded to the restful hues of tea and cream. A maid named Elsie took his hat and coat with a smile that suggested shyness rather than secrecy. "Your suite is ready," she said. "We thought perhaps you would like to see the morning room first, sir, and have tea." "Ah, mademoiselle," said Poirot, "tea is the friend who understands every mood." She led him along a corridor where the carpet's pattern wandered in little vines, and where the windows on the garden side admitted a pearly light. It was the kind of light that makes one speak softly without knowing why. When they reached the morning room, Poirot paused in the doorway, charmed. The fog had pressed its cool face to the long panes, and the garden beyond appeared like a watercolor, gray shrubs, a suggestion of topiary, a pale fountain whose lip pooled into a single luminous drop. Inside, a fire was composed and sensible, offering warmth but not declaring it. A tray waited, a silver teapot puffing faintly, cups thin enough to chime at a touch, tiny sandwiches arranged like postage stamps in peaceful order. There were others in the room already. Their conversation rested gently upon the table, like a lace throwlight, decorative and easily lifted. They looked up as Poirot entered, curiosity flickering across their faces, but not the kind of curiosity that pounces. Mr. Walden announced him with modest ceremony, and Poirot felt at once the agreeable sensation of being both the center and not the center, noticed, but not intruded upon. Lady Amelia Greyhaven came forward, slender and pale as a candle. The delicacy in her face did not suggest fragility. It suggested a calm that had been practiced like a musical scale. "Monsieur Poirot, welcome," she said, and the syllables of his name seemed to uncrease the air. "Please, let us be easy together. You have traveled. You must be tired. I am refreshed already." "Madame, by the prospect of your tea," he answered, and saw the ghost of approval in her smile, as if he had guessed the right password to enter the quiet intimacy of the house. Beside her stood a gentleman of middle years, tall, with the kindly stoop of a scholar. "Dr. Rowan," Lady Amelia introduced, "our village physician. He has advised this household longer than the roses have." "Only in pruning," Dr. Rowan said, and his laugh was the soft chuckle of pages turning. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot. We are a mindful house. You will find we keep more routines than secrets." "How restful," Poirot said. Near the windows, a woman in a dove-gray dress sat with a small notebook in her lap. She had the self-contained air of someone who adds little to a conversation, yet remembers all of it. Lady Amelia introduced her as Miss Iris Vale, a companion of sorts, and a dear friend to everyone who understands the pleasure of quiet hours. Lady Amelia added. Miss Vale's eyes lifted briefly to Poirot's, then returned to her page, where she wrote a single neat word and underlined it once. The stillness around her was not emptiness, but concentration, like a pond that holds a perfect reflection. At the mantel stood a gentleman, whose careful mustache would have interested Poirot in any case. It was a mustache that knew its duties and executed them. His suit was cut with old-world correctness, and his shoes had the fastidious sheen of a mirrored piano. "Mr. Lionel Ashcroft," Lady Amelia said, "an old family friend and sometime adviser." "Sometime," Mr. Ashcroft agreed, and his voice was smooth without being slippery. "One advises only when asked, and only as much as is useful." His gaze moved lightly over appraising without inventorying, the way a good tailor observes a customer in a chair near the hearth. A young woman was threading a ribbon through the finger length of a glove. Her hair had a lake's calmness, glossy and set in patient waves. When she looked up, the blue of her eyes held the serenity of winter sky. "My niece, Miss Lily Greyhaven. She is seldom idle and never hurried." Lily's smile arrived slowly, like a sunrise that refused to be theatrical. "I am honored to meet you, Monsieur Poirot." "The honor is reciprocal, mademoiselle," Poirot said, inclining his head. "Any niece who mends gloves with such calm must be a philosopher." There were others, Mr. Beale, the estate manager who carried with him the restful competence of a well-oiled lock, and Mrs. Remington, the housekeeper, whose voice had the agreeable firmness of folded linen. Names and faces arranged themselves in Poirot's mind like figures on a chessboard, though he did not feel the need to play. He allowed the impressions to settle like dust motes in a shaft of sun, drifting into place in their own time. Tea was poured. The silver lid sighed back. The steam rose like a polite hint. The first sip was a consolation and a greeting, both a warmth that began in the chest and radiated outward in patient rings. Conversation resumed, not pressing upon the newcomer with questions, but offering gentle topics, the late roses that still shyly showed their faces near the south wall, the old music room whose piano had a cough but a tender heart, the village fete that had been postponed by rain and replaced with an impromptu reading of poetry in the West Hall. It was his profession, but it was also his pleasure. He heard more in the smoothness of tone than in the content of sentences. He heard, for example, how Mr. Ashcroft's comments always stopped one syllable before warmth, how Miss Vale's quiet recorded the pauses of others like notches on a ruler, how Dr. Rowan's reassuring statements resembled prescriptions kept deliberately mild. He noticed how Lily's glances landed on others with considerate steadiness, and how Lady Amelia, speaking little, seemed always to be listening for a sound outside the door that did not come. All of this lay lightly in the air, as harmless as the fog that rinsed the windows. If there were secrets, and what large house, what long family, did not have at least the small, kindly secrets of ordinary life? They were the kind that rests beneath the surface without stirring the water. Poirot felt no itch of urgency, no tug that insisted on attention. Even the famous iron gate, which might have suggested a certain drama, appeared in his thoughts now as a steady presence, something that kept harm out rather than in. A sentinel who had grown to love the road it watched. "Would you care to see the garden, monsieur?" Lily asked, after a time. "The fog is at its most beautiful just now. It makes the hedges seem like drawings in pencil." "Enchanted," Poirot said, and rose with unhurried delight. He turned once to Lady Amelia, who nodded with a pale gratitude that had nothing to do with worry. It had to do with hospitality, with making sure a guest found the particular comfort that suited his temperament. They took the long corridor to the terrace, Lily walking with the easy grace of a person who trusts the floor. The terrace doors opened, and the fog made a small bow and parted just enough to allow them entrance. The garden lay like a dream from which one is not quite ready to wake. Hedges rolled in low waves. Statues revealed a shoulder, a cheek, then modestly withdrew again. The fountain's bowl collected silence in a way that made silence feel like a substance rather than an absence. Lily led him along a gravel path, where the stones were gentlemanly and did not cling to the souls. "I love mornings like this," she said in her quiet voice. "Everything feels promised rather than decided, as if the day is a letter with the seal unbroken." "Just so," Poirot murmured, savoring the image. "One does not rush to break the seal. One admires it for a moment. The wax, the crest, the idea that someone has taken care." "Exactly," she said, and smiled down at a rose that persisted on a thin stem, its petals a faint blush like the memory of summer. "When I was a child, Aunt Amelia would read letters to my old letters. From our great-grandmother, from a cousin who traveled, from a composer who stayed just 1 month at the manor and sent music afterwards. I never wanted the letter to be over. Even now, I like beginnings best." Poirot's eyes rested briefly upon her face, then moved to the fog that looped a scarf around a sundial. "Beginnings are merciful," he said. "They forgive the uncertainties." They walked to a bench carved from a single slab of stone that had warmed over decades of patient sun. Today it was cool to the touch, and the coolness felt clean. Lily sat, leaving a polite space beside her. Poirot took it, gloved hands folded neatly, elbows not quite touching the coat seams. From this angle, the iron gate was visible across the lawn, standing black and intricate as lace. The path toward it was a pale ribbon, and the gate itself was closed, but not sternly. It looked, in the fog, like a drawing done in delicate ink every curl of ironwork, a line learned by heart and copied with love. A robin perched upon the top bar, redbreast, vivid as a wax seal, then flitted away without urgency. "People say so much about it," Lily said, not as one who repeats gossip, but as one who acknowledges the presence of a story, as she might acknowledge a tree. "But I always think is simply a gate. It has done what a gate does for a very long time. It has stood. It has swung. It has waited." "A faithful servant," Poirot agreed. "Such things become part of the family. Even the hinges have their personalities." Lily laughed softly, and the sound entered the fog and made a small, bright room there. "Aunt says the left hinge is stoic and the right is sentimental. The right squeaks in damp weather, but always sounds a note that makes her remember something pleasant. She never says what." "It is good to have a hinge that plays one's memories," Poirot said. They sat for a little while, saying nothing. Silence drew silence. The comfortable kind allows one to relax not only the body but the mind. The fog seemed to stroke the garden with a slow hand. The hedges exhaled a faint herbal sweetness. Somewhere a door closed in the house without anger. The irregular drip from the fountain lip counted time, but not aggressively. Poirot felt the corners of his thoughts soften, as if the little gray cells themselves were enjoying a morning off when they rose to walk again. It was toward the western side where A.U. Alley drew two straight, dark lines down the length of the lawn. Between them, the path insisted on civility. It kept to the center with such good manners that Poirot could not help approving. At the far end, a stone arch framed a view of fields composed like a painting. The fog there thinned until a distant hedgerow was a pencil stroke and a far tree a thumbprint. "Sometimes," Lily said, "when the weather does this, we have music in the blue parlor. The walls make every note feel safe. Miss Vale reads to us 2 pages from Traveller's Diaries. Anything that remembers quietly." "It is a fortunate house," said Poirot, "to know how to offer comfort in so many forms. Aunt Amelia says that comfort is not a luxury, Lily replied simply. It is a duty. Hospitality is the keeping of small promises. A warm room, a second cup, a listening face. Your aunt is wise, Poirot said. And you, mademoiselle, you have learned her wisdom with elegance. They returned by a different path, one that carried them briefly out of sight of the iron gate in its place. A low wall came into view, dressed in moss, as an elderly gentleman might be dressed in velvet. On the wall, a cat arranged itself like punctuation, neither question mark nor exclamation, but a calm comma, inviting one to pause. Lily stroked it as they passed. It made no sound, but its back lifted in a smile inside. The morning room had replaced tea with a little lunch that had somehow set itself out, a soup that looked like silk, bread whose crust sang very softly when broken, and apples that wore their autumn scent like a shawl. Mr. Walden stood by in a manner that suggested he was not there at all, and yet the moment one reached for salt, it would already be near the fingertips. They ate, and afterwards Lady Amelia proposed, almost shyly, a reading in the blue parlour. If Monsieur Poirot is not too fatigued, fatigue was a stranger here. The blue parlour breathed in palette and proportion. Its walls wore a shade one could not name without clumsy words somewhere, between the inside of a lark's egg and the twilight of pooled water. Chairs waited at angles that welcomed rather than crowded. A harp leaned in one corner, as if resting between sentences. Miss Vale chose a journal from a shelf, a travel diary from a woman who had crossed the Alps in a winter long ago. She read with the gentlest implication of theater, allowing the rhythms to comfort rather than stir. In those pages, snow became a quiet counselor, and lanterns threw circles of homely gold on white paths, and hosts in mountain inns spoke rare words that landed slowly like good bread on a plate. Poirot closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to listen more completely. The voice and the room and the house itself braided together into a single, soothing thread. No one spoke of mysteries or of matters delicate. Not then. There was a kind of courtesy in leaving such things for the afternoon, or for the evening, or for another day entirely. It is possible, after all, to walk in a garden without naming every plant, to pass a gate without inspecting the lock. Poirot did not feel hurried by expectation, nor prodded by implication. If there were shadows, they held still and kept their distance, like respectful guests at a far table. When the reading ended, Dr. Rowan closed his eyes briefly in a gesture of approval that looked like a prayer. Mr. Ashcroft replaced the book with a care that could have belonged to a librarian or a diplomat. Lily, with the serenity of one who understands the art of endings, opened the windows a little, and the fog sent in a cool kiss that smelled of thyme. Lady Amelia thanked Miss Vale, and her thanks carried a tone that was not gratitude for performance, but for companionship. Perhaps, Lady Amelia said, we might show Monsieur Poirot the gallery before he rests. There are portraits that enjoy being looked at. How agreeable, Poirot said, and rose. The gallery was a long, light corridor that had chosen not to be solemn. The portraits gazed with the kind severity of people who had had to make decisions, but preferred not to talk about them now. A violin hung framed, a relic from the composer's month at Greyhaven. A small sketch, just a few strokes of charcoal, revealed the first plan for a fountain that had been built, and then softened by 50 years of rain. Poirot admired, with restful patience, the evidence that families leave of themselves when they expect to be found by friends and not by strangers. Chapter 3. The Legend of the Iron Gate. Lady Greyhaven paused to pour more tea. The porcelain clinked gently against the saucer. The gesture, delicate and unhurried, felt like part of the story itself, a reminder that even amidst mystery, there is grace in calmness. The gate was installed at the far edge of the estate, she said, where the cliffs drop into the sea. There it stands, still rustles, steadfast, facing the endless waves. No one knows what lies behind it. My grandfather once told me that even the key was lost, long before he was born. Over time, the iron gate became more than metal. It became a symbol. Some say it guards a treasure left by Lord Alaric. Others whisper it imprisons something darker. My mother used to say, when the fog grows thick and the sea moans against the rocks, you can hear Elias Thorne's hammer ringing faintly through the mist like a heartbeat from another world. Poirot's gaze drifted to the window, where pale tendrils of fog curled and uncurled against the glass. And yet, he said softly, one could imagine it simply as art, a gate that keeps no secrets, save those we assign to it. Lady Greyhaven nodded, her expression thoughtful. Perhaps, but legends, like iron, do not vanish easily. They bend, they weather, but they remain. As the story settled into silence, the manor itself seemed to exhale. The guests who had gathered near the hearth to listen remained still. The ticking of the clock on the mantel was steady and slow. Outside, the fog thickened until the world beyond the windows dissolved into soft nothingness. Poirot rose and wandered toward the fire, his movements as measured as the flicker of the flames. It is a beautiful tale, Lady Greyhaven. Melancholy, yes, but peaceful in its way. There is comfort in knowing that even in legend, something endures. Lady Greyhaven smiled faintly. You understand, then, why some of us find it difficult to leave this place. Greyhaven does not merely stand upon its land, it dreams upon it. Indeed, a house that dreams and, perhaps, remembers. The other guests stirred only slightly. Mr. Pembroke, a retired colonel with a kind face and a fondness for cigars, muttered something about old nonsense and sea mist. Miss Beatrice Vane, the artist, gazed wistfully at the fire, her hands clasped as if she wished to paint the sound of Lady Greyhaven's voice. Even the butler, discreet and silent at the doorway, seemed momentarily lost in thought. It was a rare kind of peace, a kind found only in houses where time has slowed to a contemplative pace. Later that evening, Poirot stepped outside. The air was cool and thick with salt. The fog drifted low, brushing against the rose bushes and the marble statues that lined the garden path. Each step he took was muffled by damp grass. He could hear the sea below, its rhythm gentle and eternal. Somewhere an owl called soft, distant, comforting. The iron gate lay beyond the hedges, out of sight. The detective paused, listening not for whispers, but for quiet itself. There was something profoundly serene in the stillness. The fog moved like silk across the landscape, and every leaf seemed wrapped in its own silence. He thought of Lady Greyhaven's story, of the blacksmith and the ancient iron. Perhaps there was truth in Itor, perhaps, as he suspected, truth mattered less than the peace such tales bring. As he walked back toward the manor, The lamps within glowed like amber pearls in the mist. He found himself smiling, not the smile of victory or deduction, but of simple contentment. For in that moment, even mystery felt gentle. That night, after dinner, the guests gathered once more in the drawing-room. The talk was light, almost tender memories of old holidays, gardens, and songs. The fire burned steadily, its soft crackle mingling with the occasional sigh of wind through the chimney. Lady Greyhaven sat in quiet contemplation, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "When I was a child," she said, "my mother used to tell me that the iron gate is not cursed at all. She believed it was blessed, that it keeps sorrow locked away, not treasure. She said that is why the fog guards it, to keep the world from waking what must sleep." "How poetic," murmured Miss Vane, "to think that the sea and fog could be watchmen of grief." Poirot nodded gently. "And yet, perhaps, they are. Nature, mademoiselle, often conceals what man cannot bear to forget." The words lingered in the air like perfume. After supper, Lady Greyhaven played the piano. The melody was slow, wistful notes falling like drops of rain onto velvet. Poirot closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him. Each tone seemed to echo from a faraway place, perhaps from behind the iron gate itself. When the song ended, no one spoke. The silence afterward was not emptiness, it was fullness, the kind that hums softly in the heart. "Lady Greyhaven," Poirot said at last, "your legend, like your music, brings not fear, but reflection. It is the kind of story that allows one to rest, not tremble." Her eyes softened. "Then I have told it well." The manor grew still. The fire burned low. The lamps dimmed one by one. In the hallways, the portraits of Greyhaven ancestors seemed to fade into slumber, their painted eyes calm under the flickering light. Poirot retired to his chamber, where a single candle burned on the bedside table. He opened the window slightly, letting the fog breathe into the room. It carried the scent of sea salt, lavender, and age. He lay back, hands folded neatly upon the coverlet, listening to the distant sound of the waves. His thoughts drifted, not toward deduction, but toward wonder, the quiet wonder of history and human hearts that preserve their mysteries, not out of fear, but love. Sleep came to him softly, as though the very fog had woven itself into his dreams. He dreamt of an endless coastline and an iron gate that opened, not to reveal a curse, but a field of white flowers swaying gently beneath the sun. In the first light of morning, the fog thinned like gauze. Poirot rose early and took a walk toward the cliffs. Dew glittered upon the grass, and the air was alive with the scent of salt and rosemary. There it stood, the iron gate, massive, intricate, and oddly beautiful. It did not seem sinister. It seemed eternal. Rust had never touched it. The carvings glowed faintly where the light kissed them, swirls of ivy, spirals of flame, and the faintest outline of a keyhole. Poirot placed his hand upon the cool metal and felt, for a brief moment, something serene, a stillness that was almost sacred. He smiled quietly. "Ah," he murmured, "so this is the great secret piece, disguised as mystery." Turning back toward the manor, he let the morning sun warm his face. Whatever lay behind the gate, he thought, could wait. For now the beauty of not knowing was enough, and so the legend rested softly like mist upon the sea. Chapter 4. An unwelcome guest. The day faded with an elegance that seemed almost rehearsed. The fog that eternal companion of Greyhaven, thinned into gossamer threads as the sun slipped behind the distant hills. The sea below was calm, a dark sheet of glass mirroring the dimming sky. Inside the manor, lamps bloomed one by one, their golden halos softening corners and shadows alike. It was an evening made for comfort, the kind of evening where one could forget the world entirely. The air carried the delicate aroma of thyme and roast, drifting from the kitchens through the long hallways. The dining table, set beneath the crystal chandelier, gleamed with quiet perfection, silver polished to mirror brightness. Crystal glasses lined like small stars, and candles flickering gently in their holders, impeccable as ever, admired the scene as he entered. There was something profoundly satisfying about symmetry, and this table, he thought, was a study in harmony. Lady Greyhaven's taste was exquisite, not extravagant, merely balanced. Every object in its rightful place. Such order, Poirot murmured, smiling faintly. Even the spoons are aligned as though awaiting justice. Lady Greyhaven, standing near the hearth, returned the smile with grace. My father used to say that a table set properly could calm the heart, no matter what storms brewed beyond the window. Wise words, madame, said Poirot. Perhaps it is why dinner, in the English countryside, is so often sacred. The guests gathered slowly, like notes in a soft melody. Colonel Pembroke, whose gentle humor filled the spaces between silences, took his seat with a satisfied sigh. Miss Beatrice Vane, radiant in a gown of dove-gray silk, smiled dreamily as she gazed into the candlelight. Dr. Keating, the family physician, adjusted his spectacles and spoke in that quiet, deliberate tone that always made his words sound thoughtful. As they dined, conversation drifted easily. The subjects were simple: the weather, the roses in the garden, the rare peace of an evening unmarred by thunder or mist. Even the ticking of the clock seemed slower, more deliberate. Poirot listened with quiet pleasure. He found a certain joy in such tranquil company, the comfort of well-tempered voices, the music of politeness. Every detail soothed the senses, the muted clink of cutlery, the hum of low laughter, the faint scent of jasmine carried by a wandering breeze through the open window. Lady Greyhaven's laughter, light and infrequent, was like the chiming of distant bells. You see, Mr. Poirot, she said, Greyhaven is not always haunted by its legends. Sometimes it remembers to be human. Ah, he replied gently, then tonight it remembers beautifully. The peace held until it did. It began as a soft, almost apologetic sound. A single knock at the great oak door. Then another, slow, deliberate, measured, like a pause in music, not a disruption. The guests looked at one another in quiet surprise. The servants exchanged glances. Visitors were rare at Greyhaven, rarer still at this hour. Lady Greyhaven lifted her head slightly. Perhaps the post, she suggested, though even she sounded uncertain. The butler, Mr. Alton, excused himself and disappeared into the hall. His footsteps echoed briefly, then faded. The guests continued their small talk, though the rhythm had subtly shifted. The silence that followed the knock seemed to ripple gently through the room, not unpleasantly, just curiously, like the faint stirring of wind through still leaves. Moments later, the butler returned. His expression was composed, but his tone carried a note of polite hesitation. A visitor, my lady, he said. He claims his arrival is of importance." Lady Greyhaven arched a brow. "A visitor? At this hour?" "Yes, my lady. He says his name is Mr. Darian Gray." The name lingered in the air like a dropped thread of silk. Lady Greyhaven's teacup paused midway to her lips. Poirot noticed it, the faintest tightening of her fingers, a whisper of surprise in her eyes. "Gray," she repeated softly. "There are no Grays in this county, so he insists, my lady, to be of the family." The dining-room door opened, and the stranger stepped in. He was tall, though not imposing, dressed in a long travel coat still glistening with the dew of the evening. His hair was dark, touched with the faint shimmer of rain. There was nothing rough about him, rather a quiet grace in his posture, a composure that seemed both weary and deliberate. His eyes, however, were what caught the room, deep gray, calm as the sea beyond the cliffs, carrying the weight of distance and years. "Forgive my intrusion," he said, his voice low and courteous. "The night was long, and I feared delay might lose me my chance to be heard." Lady Greyhaven regarded him with polite restraint. "You are Mr. Darian Gray." He inclined his head. "Yes, madame. A name I have carried all my life, though perhaps one you did not expect to hear." Poirot, ever the observer, studied him quietly. There was no haste in the man's speech, no tremor of deceit, only the soft assurance of someone accustomed to solitude. Lady Greyhaven gestured toward an empty chair. "You have come far, it seems. Will you dine with us? The hour may be late, but courtesy is never untimely." A faint smile crossed his lips. "You are most gracious." He took his seat, declining food, but accepting a glass of water. The candlelight touched his features, and something softened the weariness of travel, perhaps, or the melancholy of memory. "I was told," Mr. Darian began quietly, "that the Greyhaven line ended 2 generations ago with your father, Lady Amelia. But family histories have long roots, and sometimes they grow unseen." Lady Greyhaven's gaze was steady. "Indeed, and you believe yourself a branch of that unseen root." "I do not merely believe," he said, though his voice remained unthreatening. "I know. My grandmother was Eleanor Thorngray, daughter of Elias Thorne, the blacksmith who forged your iron gate. She was, as family legend holds, beloved by Lord Alaric himself." The room fell into a gentle stillness. No one gasped, no one whispered. The fire, as if listening, seemed to burn more softly. Poirot watched Lady Greyhaven closely. Her hands remained folded, calm and unshaken, though her eyes reflected the shimmer of long-buried memories. "You speak," she said, after a moment, "of the same Eleanor whose name our archives preserve in sorrow." "Yes," Darian replied, "but history is a selective storyteller. It remembers what it wishes. It forgets what it must." His tone was not sharp, merely sorrowful, like someone telling of rain that fell too long ago for bitterness. "I do not come for wealth or title," he continued, "only for truth. The blood of Greyhaven runs through me, whether the manor acknowledges it or not." Poirot's voice entered softly, calm as the firelight. "And yet, monsieur, truth, like inheritance, must sometimes prove itself." Darian inclined his head. "Naturally, Monsieur Poirot. That is why I came not with claims, but with questions." The rest of the evening unfolded like a slow tide. No one raised their voice. No accusation echoed. Instead, there was conversation, deliberate, measured, and strangely comforting in its civility. Lady Greyhaven, composed as marble, spoke of her family's history with grace. Darian answered with the patience of one who had rehearsed his words for years. Even the guests, though quietly fascinated, remained respectful, as though they were witnessing a reunion of souls rather than a dispute of blood. At one point, Darian reached into his coat and withdrew a small object wrapped in linen. He placed it upon the table, and when he unfolded the cloth, the candlelight caught on a small medallion iron, aged but untarnished, engraved with the Greyhaven crest, a gate entwined with ivy. "It was my grandmother's," he said softly. "She said it was given to her by Lord Alaric himself." Lady Greyhaven gazed at it for a long while. "I have seen this design only once, in the portrait gallery, upon Alaric's signet. It was said he lost it the night the gate was forged." "Then, perhaps," Darian said gently, "not lost, but passed on." Dinner concluded with quiet grace. The servants cleared the plates, the guests spoke in muted tones, and the fog pressed once again against the windows, not menacing, only enveloping. Lady Greyhaven rose, her movements slow and dignified. "Mr. Grey," she said, "the hour is late. You are welcome to rest here tonight. Whatever truth there may be, it is better sought in daylight." Darian bowed his head. "Your kindness honors both of our families." Poirot watched as they left the room, the lady and the stranger. Side by side, their silhouettes soft against the glow of the lamps. Something about the scene moved him deeply. There was no anger, no fear, only the gentle weight of time pressing upon old names and older promises. When the others had gone, Poirot remained by the fire. He stirred the embers with the tip of the poker, his thoughts as calm as the coals themselves. He murmured, half to himself, the unwelcome guest, and yet not unwelcome at all. Perhaps every house of secrets must one day open its door, if only to let the truth breathe. The manor slept in stillness that night. The wind brushed softly against the ivy. The sea murmured far below. In the west wing, where the guest rooms overlooked the cliffs, a single lamp glowed in Darian Gray's window. Poirot noticed it as he passed in the hall, a steady, patient light that burned until dawn. He thought again of the iron gate, of the legend Lady Greyhaven had told. Perhaps the stranger was right. Perhaps history had not told the whole truth. But for now, that truth rested in peace, waiting like the tide for its appointed hour. Poirot smiled faintly as he entered his room. "Yes," he whispered, "let it wait. For tonight the house deserves to dream." He set his candle on the table, listened to the sigh of the wind, and let his eyes close. The mystery could wait. Serenity could not. And so the great detective slept, not as a man in pursuit of answers, but as one at peace in the gentle embrace of Greyhaven's calm. Outside, the fog gathered once more along the cliffs. Far off, beyond the gardens, the iron gate stood silent, glimmering faintly beneath the moon, listening, perhaps, to the whisper of the sea that had seen it all. Chapter 5. The Gate Screams in the Night. Night came to Greyhaven as softly as a shawl laid across tired shoulders. Lamps dimmed, doors drew close with careful hands, and the old manor exhaled its long day into a hush. The sea, far below the cliffs, kept its patient rhythm in ancient lullaby the house had learned by heart. Mist threaded the gardens and drifted along the hedges, settling like pale silk over rose and thyme. Even the portraits in the corridor seemed to lower their painted eyes, as if consenting to rest. Poirot stood a while at his window, watching the fog collect in silver pockets over the lawn. A single lantern burned at the far end of the east wing Dorian Gray's room. No doubt while, 2 floors below, the watchful glow of the butler's lamp winked out. All seemed peaceful, deliberately so, as if the manor itself had polished the quiet to a sheen. In that gentleness, thoughts loosened. The day's conversations folded themselves neatly away. Poirot's little routines, straightening the comb, aligning his hairbrush with the edges of the tray, settling the jacket across the chair, back took on the ceremonial calm of prayer. When at last he lay down, the mattress breathed a faint scent of lavender and sun-warmed linen. He listened for the ordinary, the tick of the mantel clock, the sigh of wind in ivy, the unhurried whisper of tide. These sounds knit themselves into a web of comfort and sleep, like a courteous guest, approached without hurry, at some hour when the line between asleep and waking becomes a path of moss. The night released a sound. It began as nothing at all, a subtle tremor in the world, like a chord drawn softly from a glass rim. Poirot's eyes opened. The air in the room had changed. The silence had taken a breath. Then came the unmistakable voice of Ironlow, rising, gathering timbre, as if the metal itself were remembering how to sing. The tone brushed the walls, a long metallic vowel bending through fog and stone, and for one strange instant it was almost beautiful. Then the beauty lengthened, sharpened, and broke. The gate screamed. It was not a human cry, though it carried the shape of one. Rather, it was the sorrow of old hinges pushed beyond their patience, of bolts strained against a pressure older than the house. It rang out, and the fog took it gently and magnified it, pouring it along the cliffs and over the garden paths until the whole estate seemed to quiver on that note. Not a shriek, but a piercing lament, high, bright, and utterly singular, like a violin string drawn too tight and set humming by the sea itself. Poirot sat up. He did not rush. He breathed once, twice, let his heartbeat settle into the measured poise he favored above all things. A house in the night will make 100 noises. A man who hurries after each one learns little. Still, that sound, it did not belong to the familiar grammar of Greyhaven's rest. He rose and lit his candle. Its flame, calm and upright, threw a soft aureole on the ceiling. In the corridor, doors eased open on a murmur of slippers. The house, too polite to panic, merely stirred. Miss Beatrice Vane appeared at the far end, a shawl drawn over her hair like a veil. The colonel, stoic in a dressing gown striped with sleepy authority. Dr. Keating, with spectacles and quiet concern. Dorian Gray stood at his threshold, watchful, and from the stairs' shadow, Lady Greyhaven emerged, as dignified as if she were descending to breakfast. "A hinge," said the colonel, in a whisper that wanted to be brisk and kind. "Wind on the cliffs. Old metal." Lady Greyhaven listened to the night beyond the windows. The last trembling overtone of iron shivered through the air and dwindled into the sea. "Perhaps," she said softly, "or perhaps the past is practicing its voice." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, allow me a small promenade. Only the length of the corridor and back." There is no reason for alarm." His tone was a balm. Even the floorboards understood and did not creak as he moved. They did not descend the stairs or throw open doors. There was no stampede of curiosity. This was Greyhaven, and its rituals were gentler than that. After a few moments, when the silence returned completely, untroubled, the guests receded like careful tide, each to their room, each carrying with them the soft question of what iron dreams. Poirot returned to bed, not to sleep exactly, but to a composed waiting. He kept the candle low and watched the flame read the Ruma book of airs and small movements. When at last the wick exhausted itself, an unusual peace settled, as if even the gate had sighed and returned to slumber. Dawn arrived with a clarity that forgives everything. A sheer light unrolled across the lawns, the fog lifting in ribbons to reveal the garden's mild geometry. The roses, jeweled with dew, bowed in small courtesies to the morning. One could almost believe the night had imagined its own noises. Breakfast began with soft cups and soft voices. The silver domes reflected a manageable world. Then Mr. Alton, the butler whose presence usually brought stillness, entered, not hurried, but with the absence of hurried difference Poirot detected at once. The man stood just inside the door and waited for the room's attention, the way one waits for a wave to come ashore before speaking over it. "My lady," he said, "I regret to disturb the table. There is," and he searched for a phrase that would not bruise the morning, "a concern at the lower garden." Lady Greyhaven set down her spoon. "Which concern, Alton?" "The iron gate, my lady." No one gasped. The words passed over the table like a cool breeze. Poirot met the butler's eyes, a quiet conversation without speech. Alton, thankful for a mind prepared to receive it, added gently, "One of our guests, my lady." Near the hinge-stones, the silver dome nearest Poirot showed a small, distorted detective, staring back, perfectly composed. He folded his napkin and stood. They went as one would walk into a chapel, deliberately, with respect. The garden path, softened by dew, offered a muffled tread. Birds arranged their songs in the hedges as if to frame the moment with something kindly. The air was scented with damp earth and lemon balm. Greyhaven, even now, refused to surrender grace. The iron gate rose from the edge of the world, its filigree of ivy and flame catching a faint opal light. It was beautiful, more beautiful in morning than at night, as if daylight had washed it of every fever. The hinges, black and seamless, bore no rust. The keyhole, precise as a pupil, looked east. There, at the base of the left post, lay Colonel Pembroke. He looked asleep, more elegantly asleep than most. His head was turned slightly toward the sea. Hands settled open upon the grass, as though he had been listening to a story and chosen to rest at the best part. No disorder, no violence, only an absurdly lovely tranquility, as if the garden and the man had agreed between them to stage a portrait of repose. "Ah," Poirot breathed, not in shock, but in reverence for the stillness. He knelt, careful not to disturb dew or blade. Dr. Keating, already beside him, touched the wrist, then the throat, with the gentlest economy of movement. After a few seconds that felt strangely like prayer, the doctor exhaled and shook his head once. Not tragically, but with professional sorrow. "He is gone," he said. And even that sentence softened itself in the morning air. Lady Greyhaven's face did not collapse. It composed itself more firmly. She stepped closer, her eyes traveling from the colonel's hand to the gate's hinge to the grass in between, as if reading a sentence written in green ink. He loved the sea, she murmured, and it sounded almost like permission for him to be where he lay. Poirot's gaze settled on the hinge, Pinnet's immaculate seating, the faint crescent of fresh polish around its collar, the delicate smear where Doe had agreed to move out of the way for something heavier. He noted a slight mark on the grass, a neat oval as if a small case had rested there briefly. He looked, too, at the colonel's slippers, dry, and at the hem of the dressing gown, a kiss of damp, not more. Every detail spoke in the softest voice, but all the voices together began to form a choir. He did not touch the body. He traced the air above it with a fingertip, as if outlining a veil. "Madame," he said, rising, "let us keep the kindness of this place. We will not crowd him. Mr. Alton, a blanket, if you please, to guard the dignity. Dr. Keating, we will wait upon your formalities. And for the others tea, I think, warmth and quiet." These simple instructions, delivered like a blessing, organized the morning without friction. A light shawl was brought for Lady Greyhaven. She refused with gratitude and stood unshaken, a figure carved of calm. The sun, unsure whether to brighten, paused just behind a cloud and offered a softer light instead. Darian Gray approached only as far as courtesy allowed, then stopped, hands clasped. "I spoke with him late," he said, voice measured. "Only of trivial things. He found the gate romantic and called it a stubborn sentinel." Poirot nodded, filing the phrase as one files a useful key. He stepped nearer to the iron, placed a palm against its cool surface, and felt nothing of last night's cryonally the deep, indifferent patience of metal. Yet at the base of the hinge he found, almost shyly hiding in the seam where stone met soil, a single thread of linen, pale as a moth's wing, caught on an edge too subtle for ordinary eyes. He held it a moment in the morning, and the morning told him nothing, which was itself something to know. "Listen," Poirot said softly. They did, and the sea answered for them. "There is no haste," he went on. "The truth here is not a horse. It is a tide. It will come in, and we will be present when it does." He glanced at the gate's bottom bar, where dew had formed a line of beads, 12 distinct droplets, shining like a gentle abacus. Near the left hinge, one bead had broken and drawn a thin track outward, a silver stroke pointing not to the sea but back toward the yew-walk. A hint, perhaps, or merely the art of water. Poirot's eyes followed the line of hedge, and in that green corridor he noticed a footprint not deep enough to be fear, not careless enough to be innocence only intentional. "Madame," he said at last, "we shall keep the garden calm. I will ask that no one comes here unless with the doctor or the butler. The colonel will have—" Lady Greyhaven inclined her head. "You will do what must be done. Mr. Poirot Greyhaven trusts you." He looked once more at the iron gate, the flawless seam where it met the world, and felt the night's metallic lament echo once, briefly, in memory. It had been the sound of a limit tested, of history, perhaps, pressing its weight against the present to see where it would yield back at the manor. Tea arrived as he had asked, strong, fragrant, restorative. Cups warmed hands. Voices remained low, but not tragically so. Grief, at Greyhaven, it seemed, had chosen gentleness for its shape. Poirot took a single sip, set the cup precisely on its saucer, and let his eyes rest a moment on the window. The garden beyond lay in clarity. The gate, even at this distance, wore its mystery, with perfect poise. To scream, he murmured, is sometimes to be heard by those who refuse to listen. But to whisper, that is how truth approaches a house like this. He rose. There would be questions to ask, and small, exact distances to measure. A linen thread to place in its correct sentence. A hinge that might, under the right fingertips, speak. But the day, obedient to his nature, would proceed without hurry. Outside, the sea continued its faithful conversation with the cliffs, and the roses, brushed by a considerate breeze, nodded as if in agreement. Nothing here would be solved with force. The little gray cells would move like light, and somewhere at the margin of sound, as the garden resumed its calm, the iron gate kept its counsel, shining faintly in the tender brightness of morning. Chapter 6. Poirot Takes Command. The morning at Greyhaven settled into a stillness that felt deliberate, as if the house had placed both hands upon the day and asked it to breathe. The sea kept its quiet cadence below the cliffs. In the kitchens, kettles hummed. Footsteps moved softly across carpeted halls. Nothing was hurried, but everything, somehow, was attentive. Poirot stood in the long gallery with its windows open an inch to the salt air. He had arranged a small table near the central casement, a blotter, a fountain pen, a clean notebook, a folded handkerchief. Beside these, the single thread of pale linen recovered from the gate, secured in a glassine envelope. His orderliness did not fight the morning. It harmonized with it. Lady Greyhaven entered without ceremony. The light from the window touched the silver in her hair and turned it into a gentle halo. "Mr. Poirot," she said, "I have sent a messenger to the town. The telephone lines." She lifted a hand, a graceful admission of defeat. "The storm in the night took them. We cannot raise the yard." Poirot inclined his head. "Then we must be the yard, madame, until the weather relents." He closed the notebook softly. "It is not the worst fortune. An hour of calm is often worth a day of noise." She regarded him with a steadied sorrow. "What would you have me do?" "Lend me your authority," he replied. "I will ask for everyone's patience. Until Scotland Yard arrives, we will keep Greyhaven like a clock under glass, protected, precise, and observed." Lady Greyhaven's gaze moved to the glassine envelope. "You will have it," she said simply. "The house is yours." They crossed the corridor to the drawing-room, where the guests few now, but bound together by the morning's quiet, had gathered. Mr. Alton, exact as a metronome, stood near the door. Miss Beatrice Vane sat with her hands folded over a closed sketchbook. Dr. Keating's spectacles held to obedient ovals of light. Dorian Gray remained by the mantel, as if guarding the fire with thought alone. Poirot did not take the center of the room. He placed himself slightly to one side, where the eye could rest upon him without effort. His voice, when it came, was soft but clear. "Madame, messieurs," he said, "I must ask, with both courtesy and conviction, that we make of Greyhaven a sealed place. The lanes are treacherous, the telephone lines are silent, and Scotland Yard will be delayed by weather. Until they join us, I declare the estate closed. No one leaves until the truth opens the gate." The sentence hung in the air with the clean weight of a bell tone. It did not alarm, it settled. Even the fire accepted it with a little sigh. Miss Vane drew a slow breath. "Will it be long, monsieur?" "Long, no," he said gently. "Exact, we will move with care. A careful hour is kinder than a careless day." The Colonel's empty armchair, placed by the window, remained dignified and undisturbed. Poirot allowed the room a moment to notice it, and then continued. "I ask for cooperation. You will not find me the jailer. I am, how you say, the conductor of a very quiet orchestra. If each of you plays your part, the music will bring us to the correct cadence." Dr. Keating nodded. "You may rely on me. I would like to visit the scene once more, discreetly, for the formal report." "Of course," said Poirot. "We will go together shortly. Mr. Altonlocke, the garden doors that lead directly to the lower lawn. Keep the keys with you, and kindly invite the maids and the gardener to the servants' hall at noon. I would like everyone to hear the same requests." "Very good, sir," said the butler, already turning the plan into action. Poirot faced the company again. "A few practicalities. You will remain within the principal rooms, the library, the drawing room, the card room, your bedrooms, yes, but do not wander far outside. If you wish to walk, use the long corridor or the front terrace. For the present, no one is to approach the iron gate. If there is something you must tell me, you will tell me, and I will make the approach myself." Dorian Gray's expression stayed composed. "You think the gate will speak again?" Poirot smiled the smallest smile. "If it does, we will be listening. But I think it has already said enough for the morning." He let that quiet observation rest, then added, "I would be grateful if each of you could write, in your own hand, where you were between midnight and dawn, and with whom you spoke. Not dramadate what you saw from your window, which footstep you heard in the hall, the shape of the wind. The truth often arrives disguised as something ordinary." Miss Vane looked relieved by the task. "I can do that," she said. "Ordinary things are what I love to notice." "Just so," Poirot replied. "Bring your notes to me by 11. We will take tea, not interrogation." The room exhaled. In the gentle housekeeping of these instructions, fear found no chair to occupy. People rose with purpose rather than agitation. Lady Greyhaven touched Poirot's sleeve a light, grateful contact. "Thank you," she said. "You make restraint feel like care." "It is care," he answered. "Panic injures the innocent and flatters the guilty. We will have neither." He spent the next hour with Dr. Keating and Mr. Alton, a small procession moving through the house with the calm of a measured melody. In the library, Poirot noted a pair of muddy flecks on the matino, larger than commas. In the side passage, he regarded a vase of irises and found one petal pressed against the rim, as if a sleeve had brushed it in passing. On the back staircase, a single tread held a fainter scuff than its neighbors. He observed and did not disturb. He recorded and did not pronounce. At the lower garden they paused. The sea shone with a winter brightness despite the season, the cliff grass slick with recent mist. Colonel Pembroke had been moved with dignity. A lawn rug covered the place where he had lain. The iron gate stood as always patient, perfect, uninterested in human schedules. "Look," Poirot said quietly to the doctor, indicating the hinge stone. "Here is the crescent of polish again. Not the mark of force, I think, but of friction renewed by care. Someone has tended this metal recently, perhaps to coax silence from a tour noise. Dr. Keating rubbed his chin. You believe someone wanted the scream. I believe the gate does not scream without encouragement, Poirot replied. But encouragement may be accident as easily as intention. He knelt, not to touch, but to see. The dew line told its tiny stories. A bead disturbed, a thread caught, a finer grit collected near the keyhole, as if something metal had hovered and withdrawn. He rose with the contentment of a man who has read a paragraph, not a conclusion. They returned by the yew walk, where the hedges formed long green corridors of cool shade. Poirot measured a pace or two with his eye, and paused by a shallow footprint. It was almost not there. That pleased him. The truth at Greyhaven preferred modesty. By 10:30 he was again in the gallery. A small tray arrived, tea for 3 and a plate of simple biscuits. Miss Vane came first with her notes. Poirot read them while she sat, hands folded, gaze steady. She had the gift of describing without performing, I heard. She wrote in her delicate hand, a sound like a whale's sigh pulled through a violin string long, then thin at the end. I also heard the clock in the landing strike 2. I did not sleep again for a time, but I was not afraid. I drew roses by candlelight and decided that iron can be beautiful, even when it protests. Poirot thanked her and asked a question or two about doors and drafts. She answered with painterly precision. When she left, the room kept a little of her quiet. Dorian Gray arrived second. His statement was spare, readings by the fire until 1. The window opened a crack to the fog. Wakefulness after the sound. A short walk in the corridor to ensure Miss Vane, whom he had seen earlier, was not distressed. Then wakefulness until dawn. No embroidery, only edges. You chose not to look from your window toward the gate, Poirot asked. I chose to let the night keep its privacy, Dorian said. Greyhaven feels, curated, Monsieur Poirot. I did not wish to rearrange its shadows. Poirot nodded. The answer had the shape of truth, or at least of a man used to solitude. Others followed, Mr. Alton with the precise routes of his patrol, 2 maids, with honest alarm and the names of the doors they had checked, the gardener, Weatherslode and sincere, who had heard the sound from his cottage and said a prayer without leaving his chair. Each account was folded into Poirot's notebook like a pressed leaf dot at noon. He addressed the household again in the servants' hall. His words were fewer this time. You have done well, he told them. You will continue to do well. Keep your habits. Report the unusual to Mr. Alton, who will report to me. We will not frighten the day. When he stepped back into the main corridor, the rain returned light, even companionable. It clicked against the windows like gentle fingertips. The telephone, tested once more, offered only a patient silence. Poirot looked at the instrument as one looks at a tired horse and decided not to ask more of it. Lady Greyhaven found him in the doorway and studied his face, which gave nothing away except calm. Are we safe? She asked. We are contained, he replied. Safety is a promise no wise man makes, but composure that we can guarantee. And composure is fertile ground for truth. She seemed to accept this with relief. Will you rest? Later, he said, and smiled. For now, we will let the little gray cells walk the rooms. They enjoy a promenade. He returned to the gallery, to the window, to the sea. The house now ran on a rhythm he had chosen. Tea at the hour, notes at the half, doors locked, gardens quiet, voices low. Not a prison observatory. The storm beyond the lanes would keep the world at bay. Within, a smaller weather changed very slightly in his favor. Poirot placed the linen thread on the blotter and drew a tiny sketch of the hinge. He wrote a single line under it, not a verdict but a promise to himself. When the truth is ready, the gate will open without screaming. He capped his pen, set it parallel to the notebook's edge, and allowed the house to be peaceful again. Outside, the rain softened. Inside, the clock ticked. Greyhaven, sealed and serene, waited not impatiently, but with the quiet poise of a secret preparing to become a story told in daylight. Chapter 7. The Puzzle of the Locked Room. Morning sunlight, pale as new cream, slipped through the high windows of Greyhaven Manor, brushing across the corridors like the hand of time itself. The air smelled faintly of salt and wood polish, the familiar fragrance of continuity in a house that had seen too much. Despite the previous day's tragedy, Greyhaven had dressed itself in quiet composure once again. Poirot, already immaculate in his grey suit, moved through the hall with unhurried grace. Every footstep was deliberate. Even the sound of his polished shoes seemed to keep rhythm with thought. In his hand, he carried his small notebook and a single white glover, habit of caution more than necessity. He had asked to see the late Colonel Pembroke's chamber, not the garden where his body had been found, but his room, his last sanctuary. And now, it seemed, his final riddle. Lady Greyhaven guided him there herself. Her expression was poised and restrained, her voice soft but clear. "No one has touched anything since you gave your instructions, Monsieur Poirot," she said. "The key was found inside. The door was bolted when Mr. Alton and I arrived." "Trs Bean," Poirot murmured, bowing slightly. "You have preserved the integrity of the scene." "I thank you, madame. The truth, she is delicate. She dislikes disturbance." She inclined her head, her composure that of a woman who had practiced serenity for a lifetime. "I shall leave you to your work, then." Poirot waited until her footsteps faded. Then he turned to the butler. "Mr. Alton, my thanks, also. You will remain nearby. If I call, you will come quietly." "Yes, sir." When the butler withdrew, Poirot entered the room and closed the door behind him. The chamber was orderly to the point of tenderness. Morning light spilled across an oak writing desk, upon which sat a pen, a pipe, and a half-folded letter. The scent of tobacco lingered faintly in the air, warm, familiar, human. On the dressing table, a pair of cufflinks glimmered beside a porcelain shaving bowl. The bed was made, the counterpane smooth, and there, at the door, gleamed the truth's first whisper, the heavy brass bolt. Drawn from the inside, Poirot ran a finger just above its edge without touching. "So," he murmured softly, "the Colonel. He locks himself in, and yet when he is found, he lies outside, in the garden by the iron gate. Between here and there is a mystery. Between lock and sea, a thread invisible." He stepped further into the room, his eyes roaming over every surface, not with greed but with courtesy, as if asking permission to understand. He noticed the faint mark upon the rug, a half-print, curved as though from a heel, pressed once and withdrawn. On the nightstand, a small key-ring lay neatly aligned beside a book of poems. The pages creased at crossing the bar. Yet one key was missing. The outline was there faint. Clean space in the dust where the metal had once lain. Poirot's brow softened. An iron key of ancient design, he whispered. The key to the gate, perhaps. Or a key to something smaller. Box, a heart, a promise. He took a moment to breathe, feeling the air of the room as one feels the temperature of a patient. The silence here was not ordinary. It had a structure, as though built from decisions. The decision to bolt a door, to place one's cufflinks precisely, to fold a letter halfway and stop. Poirot drew closer to the desk. The letter, when carefully unfolded, revealed a few lines written in an assured but hurried hand. My dear Amelia, the matter will be resolved before dawn. The truth cannot remain locked forever. No signature, no address. Only a faint ring of moisture in the paper's corner, as if a glass had once stood upon it. Poirot smiled sadly. Ah, mon colonel, you were perhaps braver in your convictions than in your caution. The detective turned his attention to the door once more. He crouched slightly, examining the bolts fitting. The screws were old but firm. The brass gleamed faintly, as though polished recently. Beneath it, a small indentation caught the light, hardly visible unless one looked for it. A scrape, circular, like the mark of a coin turned slowly against metal. Poirot traced the air above it thoughtfully. Someone outside, perhaps, with something narrow and strong a wire. A thin blade unbolting what should be secure. But nan, impossible, it bolts inward. Unless, he rose, eyes alight with curiosity, but his manner remained calm, almost fond. Ah, but there is always a way, is there not, mon ami? He began pacing gently. His steps were quiet, almost meditative. Each corner of the room was considered as though it were a verse in a poem. He observed the angle of the window latch, the faint stain of candle wax upon the sill, the alignment of the clock upon the mantel 3 minutes slow. Always a sign of human touch. The window itself overlooked the gardens below. From here, one could just glimpse the iron gate, faintly silver in the morning haze, its shape mirrored in miniature upon the glass. Poirot's reflection seemed to regard it too. Locked from within, he murmured again. Yet something takens, something small, something that travels easily in a pocket. Why, then, the appearance of impossibility? To whom does impossibility serve? Always, it flatters the murderer's ego. But Poirot did not frown. He smiled, and there was kindness in the gesture. Patience, little gray cells. We shall not hurry. We shall let the puzzle breathe. He turned next to the writing desk. Every drawer slid open with the faint sigh of well-oiled wood. Inside, there were papers, military correspondence, neat as his uniform had once been. But one drawer resisted slightly. When it yielded, it revealed a hollow beneath the lining. Poirot leaned closer. There was no object within, only the faint scent of iron, sharp, metallic, clean. He nodded once. So it is true. The missing key slept here. It was lifted with care. He took a pencil from his pocket and traced the edges of the hollow. The dust told its story faithfully. Removed, not stolen in haste. Whoever took it, they knew where it lay. His eyes moved again to the folded letter. The matter will be resolved before dawn. What matter? Poirot murmured. And why must it be resolved beneath the eyes of the iron gate? The air seemed to answer with silence, the kind that feels almost tender. Poirot crossed to the window again and stood looking out toward the sea. The light had deepened, turning the fog to pearl. Below, the lawns gleamed faintly with dew. The iron gate remained still, magnificent and mute. He thought of the Colonel's measured nature, of Lady Greyhaven's quiet dignity, of Darian Gray's claim to blood and inheritance. He thought of the legend of the gate, a barrier that locked away both treasure and cursand. How once again a key had vanished. The detective closed his notebook softly. A locked door, a missing key, a man who promises truth before dawn and dies beneath the very gate that guards it. It is beautiful, yes, but beauty can be dangerous. He smiled faintly. Still, one must never rush a beautiful riddle. Even murder, when draped in elegance, must be solved politely. He turned once more to the door, tracing the gleam of brass with his eyes, locked from within, yet touched from without, like every human heart that hides a secret. With that, Poirot extinguished the lamp, drew the curtains half shut, and stepped into the hall, closing the door softly behind him. The click of the latch was gentle, final, respectful. "Now," he said quietly, "we let the truth take her morning walk." Chapter 8: Secrets Behind Polished Silver. The afternoon light drifted lazily into the great dining room of Greyhaven Manor, soft and golden, like tea poured through lace. Dust motes swayed in the air, glimmering with each flick of the sunlight. The long table, once the heart of the estate's gatherings, now lay bare, its polished surface gleaming like a mirror that remembered laughter. Poirot stood before it, hands clasped behind his back, his reflection faintly wavering in the sheen of silver and glass. He was alone, save for the sound of his own footsteps echoing gently upon the parquet floor. The quiet here was different, intimate, thoughtful, almost forgiving. He leaned slightly forward, studying the array of cleaned silverware that Mr. Alton had arranged for the evening meal to come. Every fork and knife was perfectly placed. Each plate gleamed with the kind of care only a devoted hand could give. But Poirot's eyes, sharp beneath their calm, noticed something, a shimmer that did not belong to mere polish, a pattern hidden within perfection. He drew a small magnifier from his pocket and bent closer. There, along the inner rim of one silver plate, barely visible to the untrained eye, were fine scratches. At first they appeared random tiny scuffs left by years of service, but under the light, the strokes began to align, forming letters, hesitant but deliberate. "Forgive me at the gate." The words rested there, etched in secret, as though a confession whispered into metal. Poirot traced the phrase with a gloved finger, not to erase, but to feel its weight. The silver was cold, smooth, unyielding, yet within it was sorrow. "Ah," he murmured softly, "so even silver remembers what the heart would hide." He straightened, eyes reflecting both compassion and thought. Whoever had engraved this message had done so not in haste, but with aching patience. The scratches bore rhythm, the tremor of hesitation, the burden of remorse. It was not vandalism, it was penance. Poirot glanced toward the windows. The fog outside was gathering again, curling gently against the panes, as if listening. Beyond the glass, the iron gate stood in silhouette, its form distant, yet constant, like a promise made and never unmade. He looked back at the inscription, "Forgive me at the gate." Forgive whom, and for what? The words seemed less like a plea to the living and more like a quiet prayer sent into the past. Poirot smiled faintly, not with triumph, but tenderness. Even in guilt there is grace, he said. One must admire the courage of a soul that carves apology into silver rather than silence. He turned toward the door, the echo of his footsteps threading through the tranquil hall. The table behind him shimmered, holding its secret with the dignity of old metal and older sorrow. Outside, the sea sighed softly beneath the fog. Somewhere, perhaps, forgiveness waited patient, eternal just, beyond the iron gate. Chapter 9. The Portrait and the Prisoner. The Gallery of Greyhaven Manor was a cathedral of quiet beauty. Afternoon light filtered through tall, arched windows, scattering across portraits that lined the walls like patient memories. The air held the faint fragrance of beeswax, an aged canvas scent of time itself, gentle and enduring. Poirot walked slowly, his polished shoes making soft, respectful sounds against the marble floor. Each painting seemed to breathe softly in its frame, the colors mellowed by age, the faces serene with secrets only silence could preserve. He paused before a particular portrait, a woman dressed in a gown of sea-green silk, her gaze poised somewhere between longing and understanding. The brushwork was delicate, the background a haze of muted blues. Yet something about her seemed incomplete, as if the artist had left a whisper unfinished. Poirot leaned closer. Beneath the softened varnish, near the line of her jaw, there was the faintest shadow, an overpainted shape, subtle but deliberate. The more he studied, the clearer it became. Another face had once been there, a figure erased, a companion removed. Ah, he murmured, even art commits silence. Lady Greyhaven joined him, her presence quiet as a sigh. That painting, she said softly, is of Eleanor Greyhaven, my ancestor. Legend says she loved the blacksmith who forged the iron gate. Poirot's eyes remained on the brushstrokes, and the artist, perhaps, painted what the family preferred to forget. She smiled faintly, the corners of her lips trembling with both sadness and pride. It is possible. Some truths were always too fragile for daylight. At that moment, Dorian Gray entered the gallery. The fog beyond the windows brightened, filling the room with pearly light. His steps slowed as his eyes lifted. For a heartbeat, all air seemed to pause. His expression softened, then deepened into stillness. That face, he whispered, I've seen it before. Poirot observed him gently. Oui, monsieur. Perhaps in the mirror. Dorian's gaze lingered on the woman's eyes, gray and calm, mirrors of his own. She could be my grandmother, he said. My reflection caught in another century. The detective inclined his head. Blood remembers what names forget. The wind brushed against the window panes, and somewhere in the distance a door creaked as if turning a page. The light shifted again, catching the gilt frame and igniting the soft gold of Eleanor's gown. For an instant, her painted eyes seemed almost alive, filled, not with sadness, but peace. Poirot spoke quietly, almost reverently. A portrait conceals. A prisoner waits. Yet both desire only recognition. As they stood together before the painting, Greyhaven Manor seemed to listen. The silence between them was not empty, it was tender, forgiving, full of centuries, breathing softly beneath a single stroke of color. Outside, The fog thickened, curling along the stone terrace. Somewhere beyond it, the iron gate waited, story etched not only in metal, but in every heart that still remembered. Chapter 10. The Hidden Diary of Lady Eleanor. The library of Greyhaven was hushed that evening, wrapped in the soft glow of lamplight and the quiet sigh of turning pages. Shadows rested among the shelves, long and slender, like bookmarks placed by time itself. The scent of old paper filled the air, a perfume of memory and dust, as soothing as a lullaby whispered by the past. Poirot sat at a mahogany desk, a cup of tea cooling beside his hand. Before him lay a small, leather-bound diary, its cover cracked and tender with age. It had been discovered behind the false back of an oak cabinet, tucked away as though it were never meant to be found. The initials E.G. Eleanor, Greyhaven, were embossed faintly on the front, the letters nearly erased by touch. He opened it with the reverence of a man turning the pages of a life. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, and faintly trembling. Most of the entries spoke of the ordinary, the weather, the gardens, her love of music, and the small joys of the manor. But near the end toward a section, torn and uneven, the tone changed. The words began to tremble. He read slowly, softly, aloud to himself. "I hear the hammer still, even in dreams. The sound of it echoes through the walls of Greyhaven, striking the rhythm of my guilt. Elias says the gate is complete, yet it feels unfinished, live, waiting. I did not mean to harm him, but the sea took what I could not bear to confess." Poirot's fingers rested lightly upon the page. The ink had bled slightly, where tears or, perhaps, sea mist had touched it. "Father says the gate will never open again. He says it must guard what it knows. But I see Ilias's face in every reflection, and I hear him calling when the fog is thick. I wish I had never touched the key." The detective closed the diary, his expression gentle, almost sorrowful. "Ah," he whispered, "so the legend, she is no invention. The gate does not keep treasure, it keeps silence." He rose, walking slowly to the window, where moonlight pooled upon the floor. Outside, the iron gate shimmered faintly through the mist, its form softened by distance, its secret humming beneath the quiet. Lady Greyhaven entered quietly behind him. "You found something?" she asked, her voice calm, though the edges quivered like a candle flame. Poirot turned, his tone kind. "A confession, madame, not of greed, but of love vanned, the fear that love betrayed." Lady Greyhaven lowered her gaze. Eleanor was said to have lost her mind after the blacksmith vanished. Perhaps she never lost it at all, perhaps she merely kept its truth locked away. Poirot nodded slowly. "Yes, and the gate, madame, it was her monument to remorse, to silence, and to a heart that could not unlove. Outside, the seaside, against the cliffs, and the mist seemed to draw a curtain over the world. The manor, for that moment, felt not haunted but forgiven." Chapter 11. The Gardener's Midnight Watch. The rain had ended by morning, leaving Greyhaven draped in silver mist. The garden, still heavy with dew, smelled of rosemary and quiet earth. Every leaf glistened, every petal seemed to hum faintly with the memory of the storm. Beyond the roses and hedges, the iron gate stood unmoved, dark, dignified, and inscrutable against the pale horizon. Poirot walked the gravel path with deliberate ease. his shoes making a soft rhythm that seemed to belong to the garden's own music. He found the old gardener, Mr. Finch, tending to the lavender beds near the yew walk. The man's back was slightly bent, his hands earth-stained but gentle, and his eyes, though framed with wrinkles, were clear as morning water. "You keep your garden well," Monsieur Poirot began kindly, "even after such a night." Mr. Finch chuckled softly, brushing the soil from his palms. "Ah, Greyhaven takes care of itself, sir. The ground here remembers how to live. But last night—" He paused, his gaze drifting toward the sea. "Last night was different." Poirot tilted his head. "Different, you say?" "I," the gardener replied, voice low. "I couldn't sleep for the wind. Went out to check the lilies before the rain turned rough, and that's when I saw it, the iron gate." He pointed with a trembling finger toward the cliff's edge. "It was open, sir, standing wide like a mouth that wanted to speak." Poirot's eyes followed the gesture, his face thoughtful. "Open, are you certain, monsieur? The gate that has not moved in decades?" Mr. Finch nodded. "Certain as the sunrise. The fog was thick, but I saw the shape clear enough. Both doors wide, the iron shining with the lightning. Then the wind rose, and the rain came down hard. When I looked again, it was shut, tight as ever." For a moment they stood in silence, the air filled only with the murmur of the waves below. Poirot turned slowly, his gaze sweeping over the hedges, the statues, the faint path that led to the gate. "And you saw no one else?" he asked gently. "No one, sir. Just the fog, moving about like it had a mind of its own. But I swear upon my soul, the gate was open. It was like Greyhaven itself was breathing." Poirot gave a small, comforting smile. "Perhaps, mon ami, it was. A house, a garden, they are like people. They remember, they sigh." The old man looked relieved by the gentleness in the detective's tone. "You don't think me daft, then?" "Nan," Poirot said softly, "I think you saw exactly what you were meant to see." As he turned to leave, the mist began to thin, revealing the distant shimmer of the iron gate closed once more, silent and eternal. Yet Poirot paused on the path, hands behind his back, and whispered to himself, "A gate that opens to no hand at Allah. That is a mystery even nature would envy." The sea answered with a long, peaceful sigh, and the garden, washed clean by rain, seemed to listen. Chapter 12. The Poisoned Chalice. Morning arrived with deceptive gentleness. The rain had gone, leaving Greyhaven washed in a light so tender it seemed to forgive the world. The breakfast room glowed beneath that pale sun-linen crisp, silver bright, the air scented faintly with orange peel and coffee. For a few blessed moments, the manor felt at peace again. Poirot took his seat near the window, his napkin folded precisely across his knee. Around him, conversation flowed softly, like a stream gliding over polished stones. Lady Greyhaven poured tea with her customary grace. Miss Beatrice Vane spoke dreamily about the sunlight in the rose garden. Darian Gray read silently by the fire, his face thoughtful but calm. It was a morning that asked only to be trusted. And yet, beneath that calm, Poirot's mind moved with quiet vigilance. The truth, he knew, often approached softly like fog, like tea steam, like the hand that refills a cup. He glanced up just as Mr. Alton, the butler, entered, carrying a silver tray of fresh cups. The porcelain gleamed. The scent of jasmine drifted gently through the room. He served each guest in turn, his movements polished, unhurried, and precise. When he reached Dr. Keating, the doctor smiled, thanked him, and lifted the cup to his lips. It was only a moment, barely the time it takes for a sigh. Then the doctor's hand trembled. His cup slipped from his grasp, striking the saucer with a delicate chime before tumbling to the floor. The sound shattered the morning stillness. "Dr. Keating," cried Lady Greyhaven, rising swiftly. But Poirot was already on his feet. He moved without haste, but with the perfect economy of instinct. The doctor's complexion had gone pale as parchment. His breath came shallow, his eyes unfocused. Poirot's hand found the pulse, steady but weakening. "Alton," Poirot said quietly. "Call for water hot and send for the maid with salt. Lady Greyhaven, open the window, if you please." There was no panic, only the rhythm of command delivered in tones that soothed rather than startled. Within minutes, the room obeyed his calm. Dr. Keating stirred faintly, whispering something incoherent before falling back once more. Poirot's gaze drifted to the fallen Cupid's rim, glinting faintly where sunlight caught it. He knelt, his eyes narrowing. On the smooth surface of the porcelain, faint but distinct, were fingerprints, two overlapping sets, blurred by touch but visible enough to trace. Poirot motioned to Lady Greyhaven. "You will forgive me, madame," he said softly, "but I must trouble your servants no further. This cup will speak." He lifted it with a handkerchief, examining it closely beneath the morning light. The prints were clear now, delicate as a ghost's signature, and then he saw it, the pattern, unmistakable. They belonged not to Dr. Keating, not to Alton, but to Miss Beatrice Vane. The room remained utterly still, filled with birdsong from beyond the window and the faint hum of the sea. Poirot's voice, when it came, was soft, almost sorrowful. "Ah," he said quietly, "even innocence leaves its mark upon what it loves." Outside, the morning light shimmered across the silver tray, pure and untroubled, as though the day itself refused to believe in poison. Chapter 13. Hastings returns to Greyhaven. The morning mist had begun to lift, revealing the tender green of the lawns and the glitter of dew upon the hedges. Greyhaven, wrapped once again in its habitual grace, seemed almost unaware of its recent unrest. The iron gate, far off and faintly gleaming, stood as silent and watchful as ever. Poirot sat near the drawing-room window, his cup of chocolate steaming gently, the fire murmuring in its grate. He had spent the early hours in thought, walking the corridors with measured calm, arranging the scattered details of the mystery like notes upon a quiet melody. Yet even as his mind moved among questions, his heart was steady. It was a morning made for composure. Then came the sound of carriage wheels upon gravel, steady, confident, familiar. Poirot's eyes lifted. A smile, rare and genuine, touched his lips. "Mon ami," he whispered. Could it be? Moments later, the door opened, and there he was, Captain Arthur Hastings, stalwart, ruddy-cheeked, and splendidly out of place amid Greyhaven's misty refinement. His very presence seemed to draw sunlight into the room. He exclaimed, striding forward with the same open warmth that had always contrasted the detective's meticulous reserve. "I had to come at once, news from London, and rather a tangle of it too." Poirot rose, extending both hands with quiet delight. "Ah, Monsieur Hastings. To see you here at Greyhaven it is as if the rain itself has decided to smile." They laughed softly, the sound easy, comforting, unhurried. Lady Greyhaven entered soon after, drawn by the sound of renewed friendship. Poirot made introductions with his usual grace, and soon they were seated by the fire. Hastings, with Poirot, listening, the house itself seeming to lean in for what was to come. "I've come from Scotland Yard," Hastings began. "They've uncovered something rather remarkable about our late Colonel Pembroke. It appears he was not here on holiday at all, but on assignment. A private investigation, one tied to a matter of inheritance fraud dating back nearly 30 years. Poirot's brows arched, but his tone remained serenely curious. "Ah, so, our good colonel, even in retirement, continued to chase the shadows of deception." "Precisely. But there's more," Hastings continued, lowering his voice. "The name that appeared most frequently in the old documents, Lias Thorne, the blacksmith." Lady Greyhaven's teacup stilled in her hand. The fire popped gently, as if acknowledging a truth long dormant. Poirot folded his hands beneath his chin. "A lure, the circle closes. The gate, the key, the lover's end, now a theft wrapped in time." He leaned back, eyes half closed in thought, yet his tone remained calm, almost musical. "It is beautiful, Hastings, terrible, but beautiful. To think that love, guilt, and greed have danced together here for so many years, each believing itself alone." Hastings smiled faintly, watching the detective's expression soften. "You've missed this, haven't you?" Poirot nodded, a serene gleam in his eyes. "Oui, mon ami. But here even mystery has manners." Outside, the mist thinned entirely, revealing the iron gate beneath a shaft of pale sunlight. And changed, and yet, somehow, listening. Chapter 14. The map beneath the tapestry. Evening had folded itself gently over Greyhaven, its soft blue light brushing against stone and ivy. The manor seemed hushed in thought, as though the walls themselves were listening to secrets too old to name. Candles flickered in the long gallery, their glow reflected faintly in the eyes of painted ancestors, each one half dreaming within its frame. Poirot moved slowly along the corridor, his hands clasped neatly behind his back. Hastings followed a few paces behind, ever patient, though less certain of where their slow wandering might lead. "Tell me, Poirot," he murmured, "what is it we are seeking this time? You've been staring at that tapestry since breakfast." Poirot smiled, the corners of his mustache gleaming in the candlelight. "Mon ami, when something old refuses to speak, it is not because it has nothing to say, merely waits for the proper question." They stopped before a vast tapestry that hung upon the north wall, its fabric faded to gentle golds and grays, its threads breathing faint traces of sea salt and centuries. The scene depicted a ship at sail upon a restless ocean, with cliffs in the distance, and what appeared to be an iron gate, woven faintly into the border. Poirot traced the edge of the design with gloved fingers. "You see, Hastings, the artist was not merely sentimental. The ship, the cliffs, the gate, these are not decoration, but instruction." He bent down slightly, examining the bottom hem. The weave there was imperfect, an almost invisible fold where the threads had thickened. Carefully, using a small penknife, he loosened a corner of the tapestry and lifted it back. Behind it, the plaster wall was cracked with age, the surface uneven. And there, faintly carved into the stone, were markings, lines, curves, and small crosses etched with deliberate care. "A map," Hastings exclaimed in wonder. "Just so," Poirot replied softly. "A map of Greyhaven itself." The detective's eyes traced the patterned hallways, courtyards, and beneath them a narrow tunnel stretching like a silver thread toward the cliffs. At its end, marked by a small flourish, was a symbol unmistakable in its elegance. The iron gate. "The tunnel," Poirot murmured, "was not legend. It exists sand. It leads to the very heart of our mystery." He studied the engraving, his mind as tranquil as the air around them. "It is beautiful, Nest Ce, the symmetry of it, one gate above, one below, as if the living and the lost share a single doorway." Hastings looked on in quiet awe. "You think someone has used it?" "Used it," Poirot said, his tone calm, almost fond. "Perhaps. Or perhaps it has been waiting like the truth itself for someone patient enough to notice." He replaced the tapestry gently, smoothing the folds with reverence. "We will go there, my friend, but not tonight. A secret deserves to be uncovered as dawn begins to let the light find it first." The candles flickered softly. Outside, the sea murmured beyond the cliffs, and the iron gate, distant and invisible in the fog, seemed to listen once more. Chapter 15. The Crypt of the Greyhavens. Dawn came softly to Greyhaven, the mist lifting in pale ribbons that curled above the hedges and the sleeping sea. Within the manor, the corridors were still hushed beneath the weight of their own secrets. Poirot, candle in hand, moved with quiet certainty through the lower hall, his polished shoes making no sound upon the worn stones. Behind him, faithful as always, came Hastings, whose curiosity glowed brighter than his lantern. "Are you quite sure," Hastings whispered, "that this is wise before breakfast?" Poirot smiled gently. "My friend, the stomach must wait when the truth calls politely. Besides, what better hour to greet what has been hidden than the first breath of morning?" They came to the tapestry once more, now lifted aside. The marks upon the wall gleamed faintly in the lamplight. At the base of the design, hidden behind an uneven panel, lay a small iron ring. Poirot tugged it gently, and the stone gave way with a soft sigh, revealing a stairway that spiraled downward into the earth. The air that rose from below was cool and clean, touched with the scent of stone and salt. Hastings held the lantern high as they began their descent. The steps were narrow but well kept, carved with the same care as a poem written in silence. "It feels alive," Hastings murmured, "as though the house itself continues beneath our feet." "Mais oui," Poirot replied softly. "Greyhaven, she has roots. And here we shall find what has nourished them, gold, perhaps, but also the darker food of memory." At the foot of the stairs, the passage opened into a small chamber, its walls lined with rough-hewn rock. In the center stood an arched iron door, sealed with the emblem of the Greyhaven crest. The light from the lantern caught on its surface, and the metal seemed to glimmer as if recalling its own reflection from long ago. Poirot approached reverently, brushing dust from the carving. "The twin of the iron gate," he whispered, "as above, so below." Together they pushed. The hinges groaned softly, yielding not in protest but in surrender. Inside lay a cryptid's floor, covered in a fine layer of sand, its walls engraved with names long faded. Upon a stone plinth rested a chest, small and ornate, the color of forgotten fire. Poirot knelt and opened it. Inside, gold coins glimmered like captured sunlights, so many that even Hastings drew in his breath. Yet Poirot's eyes passed over them as one might look upon flowers at a grave. Among the coins lay a folded letter, brittle with age. He lifted it carefully, reading by lantern glow. "Forgive me, father. I could not let him drown alone." The detective's expression softened. "Gold and guilt, mon ami," he murmured. "It seems they were buried in the same box." They stood in silence for a long time, listening to the faint whisper of the sea above them. Then Poirot closed the chest gently, as one closes a chapter too tender to reread. "Come, Hastings," he said quietly. "We have disturbed the dead enough. Let us go back to the living and to the light." The lantern's glow followed them upward, a golden echo of dawn returning home. Chapter 16. The Masked Heir. Evening returned to Greyhaven, like a soft breath from the sea. The sky above the cliffs was brushed in muted gold and lavender, and the manor, wrapped in that serene light, seemed at last to rest between revelation and peace. Yet within its quiet heart the air trembled faintly with the weight of truth waiting to be spoken. Poirot sat in the drawing-room beside the long window, his small frame composed and elegant as always. The fire burned low, its glow painting the room in shades of amber and rose. Hastings, standing by the mantel, watched him with a question in his eyes. "You know, don't you?" Hastings asked gently. Poirot smiled faintly. "Mon ami, one does not. No one understands. And now we shall allow understanding to make its entrance." As if summoned by his words, the door opened, and Dorian Gray stepped into the room. His face was calm, but there was a stillness in his eyes that carried both distance and sorrow. In his hands he held a small wooden box, the very one Poirot and Hastings had unearthed from the crypt beneath the gate. "I believe," he said quietly, "this belongs to my family." Lady Greyhaven, seated near the fire, looked up. The lamplight touched the silver in her hair. "You speak as though Greyhaven were yours," she said softly, though without anger. Dorian met her gaze, steady and kind. "It was once, and in a way it still is. For I am not who you think I am." The silence that followed was gentle, not sharp, the kind that listens rather than accuses. Poirot inclined his head, his expression serene. "You will tell us, monsieur." "My true name," Dorian said slowly, "is Dorian Thorne. I am the grandson of Elias Thorne, the blacksmith, who forged your iron gate." Lady Greyhaven's breath caught, but her voice remained calm. "Elias, but he vanished." "He did," Dorian replied. "He was betrayed. The records were destroyed, the story rewritten. My grandmother fled, carrying only a medallion, the truth. She raised my father in silence, and I was raised in her shadow. I came here not for vengeance, but for justice long denied." Poirot's eyes gleamed with gentle approval. "And yet, monsieur, revenge often disguises itself as justice. You must be careful which mask you wear." Dorian smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but I think the mask wears me no longer." He placed the small box on the table. The firelight caught its edges, the gold within shimmering faintly. This gold belonged to Elias. He buried it, not to hide greed, but guilt for the life lost at the gate, the secret that cursed us all. Lady Greyhaven rose slowly, her face softening. "Then perhaps tonight the curse ends." Poirot nodded. "Oui, madame." For truth, once unmasked, demands only forgiveness. The clock chimed softly in the hall. Outside, the sea breathed against the cliffs with an even, eternal rhythm. The iron gate, bathed in moonlight, gleamed faintly in the distances, though it, too, had at last been set free. Chapter 17. The Final Gathering. The night had deepened into a silvery storm. Rain swept softly across the windows of Greyhaven, its rhythm steady, almost musical. The thunder did not roar. It rolled like distant waves, rumbling beneath the calm heartbeat of the house. Candles flickered along the grand hall, their golden light trembling upon portraits, upon polished marble, upon faces that waited, some pale with worry, others merely tired. Poirot stood near the great fireplace, hands folded neatly before him. His posture was as poised as ever. His voice, when he spoke, carried the peace of a man who commands not fear but attention. "My friends," he began softly, "we have walked together through fog and legend. We have seen a gate that screams, a key that vanishes, and secrets that whisper from silver and stone. Tonight we shall see the picture whole." The wind pressed against the glass, and the flame of each candle bent but did not die. Hastings stood quietly to one side, his familiar, reassuring presence like an anchor in the storm. Lady Greyhaven sat in her chair near the hearth, pale but unflinching, her eyes calm pools of sorrow and grace. Miss Beatrice Vane lingered by the window, fingers tracing the edge of her shawl, her expression a quiet prayer. Darian Thorne, no longer masked by false identity, stood at the far end of the table, his face a blend of grief and release. Poirot began to walk slowly, his voice gentle but sure. When the colonel died by the iron gate, it was not vengeance alone that struck him down. No, it was guilt, guilt inherited, guilt shared, guilt buried beneath love and legend alike. And yet the manner of his death, that was deliberate. He paused beside the long table, where the polished silver gleamed faintly in the flickering light. A cup was poisoned, but the poisoner was not cruel. The act was one of desperation, a silencing, yes, but also a plea for peace. Miss Vane's breath caught, but Poirot raised a hand softly, not in accusation, but in kindness. "Do not tremble, mademoiselle. You did not poison with hatred, but with fear. You believed the colonel would reveal the truth of your mother's, nay Eleanor's, secret. You wished to protect what little remained of her honor." Tears glimmered in Beatrice's eyes, but her voice was quiet. "I didn't mean for him to die so quickly. I only wished to delay him." Poirot bowed his head slightly. "The heart does not measure dosage, only intent." He turned then to Lady Greyhaven and Darian Thorne, "And the rest your family's tale. Your intertwined sorrow, it has come full circle. The treasure beneath the gate was never gold, but forgiveness." Thunder rolled once more, low and distant, as though the heavens themselves approved. Poirot's tone softened to a whisper. The iron gate was built not to keep evil out, but to hold confession safe until the world was ready to listen. A silence fell, gentle, cleansing, unbroken. Even the storm seemed to still its breath. Poirot looked from face to face, his eyes warm, his words a benediction. "And now, Mies Amos, the truth has opened the gate. The past may rest, and so may we." Outside, the wind eased. The candles burned steadily once more. Greyhaven exhaled. its long-kept secret, finally at peace. Chapter 18. The Little Grey Cell's Triumph. Morning had returned to Greyhaven like a sigh of relief. The storm had spent its fury. What remained was a tender calm, a peace too delicate to touch. The air smelled of rain and roses, of beginnings disguised as endings. The sea below the cliffs moved with solemn grace, its rhythm steady, timeless. Poirot stood before the great window in the drawing-room, hands clasped neatly behind his back. The sunlight touched his face, glinting faintly off his silver mustache. His reflection in the glass seemed smaller, humbler, framed by a world that was finally still. Behind him, Lady Greyhaven, Hastings, and the others waited in a silence that no longer felt tense but thoughtful. It was not the silence of fear, but of understanding. Pause before truth became memory. Poirot turned at last, his expression serene, his eyes warm with the light of revelation. "Mies Amos," he said softly. "The little grey cells have finished their promenade." Hastings smiled faintly. "So, you've solved it at last, Poirot." Poirot's mustache twitched with modest amusement. "Mais oui, my friend, but it is not victory I feel, only harmony restored. Murder, you see, is rarely born from wickedness alone. Sometimes it grows from love that has forgotten its way." He walked toward the great table, where the diary of Lady Eleanor, the silver plate, and the missing key now rested together, tableau of the past. He placed his fingertips upon the diary's worn cover, speaking softly, as though addressing a restless soul. "It began, long ago, with a death-in accident, perhaps, but one wrapped in guilt. Lord Alaric Greyhaven and Elias Thorne, united in their creation of the Iron Gate, were also bound by a darker pact to conceal the death that occurred the night it was forged. A man innocent perished when the sea broke against the cliff, and his body was hidden beneath the gate itself. The legend of the curse was born to guard that secret." The room listened. Even the fire seemed to hush. "The generations that followed," Poirot continued, "inherited not gold, but guilt. Lady Eleanor, burdened by love and silence, confessed to late. Colonel Pembroke, in discovering her lost writings, sought to reveal the truth. Miss Vane, believing she was protecting her mother's memory, acted in fear. Two deaths, yes, but both children of one secret." He paused, letting the weight of understanding settle like dust upon polished wood. "The Iron Gate," he said, "did not keep trespassers out. It kept sorrow in. It was the boundary between truth and mercy." Lady Greyhaven's voice trembled softly. "And now?" Poirot smiled, gentle, almost paternal smile. "Now, madame, the gate has opened. The sea has forgiven. The living have spoken the names of the lost. The past is finished, as all things must be." He glanced toward the window, where sunlight glimmered upon the distant gate. "You see, Hastings, even the iron has rusted a little. That is how the world tells us to let go." And in the golden hush that followed, Greyhaven seemed to breathe again's legend, its truth complete. Chapter 19. The gate opens once more. Dawn came softly to Greyhaven, draping the cliffs in mist, the color of milk and pearl. The air was cool, touched with salt and promise. Not a sound disturbed the stillness, only the rhythmic hush of the sea against the rocks far below. The manor itself stood motionless, its windows pale with early light. its secrets breathing their final sigh. Poirot walked the garden path alone, his cane barely touching the dew-laden grass. The fog curled around him like silk. Behind him, Hastings followed at a respectful distance, their pace unhurried, the air between them filled with quiet understanding. At the edge of the garden, the iron gate loomed out of the mist, majestic and eternal. Its black bars gleamed faintly, and the carvings along its surface shimmered as the first sunlight slipped through the fog. For years it had remained sealed, a sentinel of silence. Yet now the air carried a strange expectancy, as if the gate itself had grown restless in the night. Poirot stopped a few paces away. "Do you feel it?" he said softly. "The morning." She holds her breath. A faint sound answered him, low, mournful, and metallic. It began as a murmur, then deepened into a slow, aching creak. The iron gate was moving. The hinges groaned, not with violence, but with effort, the effort of time surrendering its burden. The gate swung open, its motion steady, dignified, almost reverent. Mist drifted through the widening gap, carrying the scent of sea and stone. Hastings instinctively stepped forward, but Poirot lifted a hand gently. "Patience," he whispered. "When a truth awakens, we must greet it with respect." The light spilled further in, illuminating the ground just beyond the threshold. There, half buried in the damp earth, lay what the generations of Greyhaven had both feared and protected, the skeletal remains of a man. The bones were fragile, bleached by time, yet arranged with courage, though someone long ago had sought to grant peace to what conscience had taken. A faint glint of metal caught Poirot's eye. Beside the ribs lay a rusted hammer, its handle cracked but still intact. "The first victim," Poirot murmured. "Ilias Thorne's work companion, the man whose death gave birth to the legend." He knelt, his voice a whisper almost indistinguishable from the sea breeze. "Here is the truth, at last, not gold, not treasure, but absolution." Hastings stood silently, hat in hand. The sun climbed higher, touching the bones with a gentle light, turning them to pale gold. Poirot rose slowly. "The gate kept its promise," he said. "It guarded not wealth, but a wound until time itself grew kind enough to heal it." The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of lavender from the garden above. The gate stood wide now, open to sea and sky, and the silence that followed was not of fear, but of peace. Poirot turned back toward the manor, his voice low, almost tender. "Come, Hastings. The living must breakfast, and the dead they rest at last." Behind them, the iron gate gleamed in the morning sun, no longer a barrier, but a benediction. Chapter 20. Curtain at Greyhaven. The morning sun lay gently over Greyhaven, its rays spilling through the mist like threads of gold woven through silver cloth. The manor, once a monument to sorrow and silence, now stood softened by peace. Every window glowed faintly, as if the house itself breathed easier at last. The sea, always the truest witness to its secrets, murmured below the cliffs in tones of forgiveness. Poirot walked through the long corridor one final time. His step was unhurried, measured, almost reverent. Beneath his polished shoes, the floor creaked softly, like a memory bidding farewell. Behind him followed Hastings, his loyal companion, his expression a blend of melancholy and satisfaction. The great detective had done what he always did. He had untangled the knots of human frailty and left clarity in his wake. Yet this time, Something in his face spoke of gentler reflection rather than triumph. They passed beneath the portraits of the Greyhaven ancestors, their painted faces softened by time and sunlight. Lady Eleanor's likeness, newly cleaned and restored, seemed to watch them go with a quiet gratitude. Her painted eyes no longer appeared burdened by unspoken sorrow, but by serenity, by peace reclaimed through understanding. Remarkable, isn't it, Poirot? His voice respectful of the hush. How a house can change when the truth has been spoken. Poirot smiled faintly, his mustache twitching in the light. Mais, oui, Hastings. Truth is a broom most delicate. It does not sweep with fury, but with grace. Once spoken aloud, it allows even stone to rest. They entered the great hall, where Lady Greyhaven stood, waiting near the hearth. She wore black still, but her mourning seemed gentler now, more dignified than despairing. In her hand was a letter sealed with waxed, the official account Poirot had prepared for Scotland Yard, though she had yet to send it. "Mr. Poirot," she said softly, "Greyhaven owes you more than thanks. You have not only restored justice, you have restored our peace." Poirot inclined his head. "Peace, madame, is a fine payment indeed, and it was always here, waiting behind the sorrow." She smiled, the first true smile he had seen from her since his arrival. "It feels lighter now. The walls do not listen as they once did." "Non," Poirot replied gently, "because they have heard what they needed." From the windows, a light breeze drifted in, carrying the faint scent of lavender and sea salt. The iron gate, visible beyond the garden, gleamed softly beneath the sun. It no longer looked foreboding or burdened, simply was, as though it had laid down the weight of centuries. Lady Greyhaven followed Poirot's gaze. "Do you think it will ever close again?" Poirot smiled kindly. "Ah, madame, it will. But not with sorrow this time. It will close as one closes a book once. The story is finished, not forgotten." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "Then let it be so." They said their farewells with the courtesy of an older age. Poirot bowed low, kissed her hand with the gentlest formality, and turned toward the doors that opened onto the front terrace. The light outside was soft, not blinding, and the air hummed with the freshness of rebirth. Hastings fell into step beside him as they crossed the gravel path that led to the waiting car. "You'll miss it, old chap," he said kindly. Poirot chuckled. "Ah, Hastings, I miss nothing. I remember everything. And Greyhaven, she will not fade from the little grey cells so easily." They paused near the garden, where the dew still clung to the roses like pearls. The iron gate stood open, its hinges silent now, its shadow stretched long across the grass. The scent of salt and bloom mingled in the air, a fragrance of ending and renewal. Poirot turned for one last look. "It is beautiful, n'est-ce pas?" Hastings nodded. "Yes, and peaceful. You've given that back to them." "Non, mon ami," Poirot said softly. "They gave it to themselves. I merely handed them the key." For a long moment, neither man spoke. The sea whispered gently below, and the sunlight shifted across the cliffs, painting the iron in gold. Then Poirot, his voice low and calm, added words that would linger long after they left. "It is not the gate that was iron, mon ami, it was the hearts behind it." Hastings smiled, deeply moved. "And now?" he asked. "Now," Poirot said, "the hearts have opened." They continued walking, the manor slowly receding behind them until it became a figure of light upon the horizon. The wind lifted the edges of Poirot's coat. The path curved toward the waiting car, where the driver, hat in hand, stood ready as they climbed in. Hastings glanced once more at the house. "You know," he said softly, "I think Greyhaven will be remembered not for its secrets, but for its forgiveness." Poirot's eyes softened. "That, my dear Hastings, is the only treasure worth guarding." The car began to roll down the lane, gravel crunching softly beneath its tires. The mist had thinned to a silver veil, and beyond it, the iron gate gleamed for a final time in the Suna promise. Not a warning dot as Greyhaven disappeared into the distance. Poirot leaned back in his seat, folding his gloved hands neatly in his lap. His eyes drifted toward the sea, serene and endless, reflecting light as truth reflects peace. Another mystery closed. Hastings murmured, "Ah." Poirot replied with a faint smile, "But not forgotten, mon ami. For every mystery leaves a trace of fragrance in the air, a memory in the heart, and this one, it leaves both." The car turned the corner, and the manor vanished completely. Yet, in the air behind them, the wind carried a whisper, faint but kind, like the echo of the iron gate as it closed, at last, with tenderness instead of grief. And so, curtain fell upon Greyhaven, not in darkness, but in light, and so the story ended.